Enigma depravatio est. Enigma crudelitas est.
Welcome back, my fellow seekers. So, the civilization before time. Was there one? Well, I have to admit that I was wrong about Graham Hancock's hypothesis of a global civilization in the distant past. But I still think Graham Hancock has got the date wrong on when this civilization may have lived. Atlantis, as I've explained in many of my videos, was not a Type 1 or even a Type 0.5. Graham Hancock and YouTubers like Bright Insight may have to look back 56 million years ago, for it is in that time period that an unusual global warming signature has been detected and continues to stumble geologists, and that is the PETM.
Dr. Joe Romm is with us. He's a senior fellow at the Center for American Progress, the founding editor of Climate Progress. He has a PhD, a doctorate in physics from MIT. Dr. Romm, welcome back to the program.
Hi, thanks for having me.
It's great to have you here with us. This piece, as you know, in the last couple of days, I've been ranting about this little video that we just did about how we may be facing a methane problem. And it's possible that when the planets hit tipping points, those tipping points can cause things to change in rapid time periods. And I noticed just a few days ago, you wrote this piece on the Permian-Eocene thermal maximum, the PETM.
Yeah.
Tell us about this.
Well, a lot of scientists trying to figure out what's going to happen today with the increase in carbon dioxide and other greenhouse gases in the atmosphere have looked back through the paleoclimate history to find similar situations. In this case, obviously, where it's humans are causing the emissions, but there are periods of time when there were rapid bursts of either carbon dioxide or methane, and one of those, which is considered a pretty good analogy for today, is this Paleocene thermal maximum, PETM, in which carbon dioxide levels in the atmosphere doubled over a very short period of time. And scientists had thought that period of time was 10,000 years, which obviously isn't so short from our perspective, but from a geologic perspective, it's pretty fast.
Right.
But this new study suggests that it actually happened over a much shorter period of time, like 13 years. And that, would be a blink of an eye from a geologic standpoint. The point is that when CO2 levels doubled 55 million years ago, the temperature warmed 9 degrees Fahrenheit, and the ocean got very acidified from all the carbon dioxide that then went into the ocean. We are in the process of doubling CO2 emission levels ourselves by probably shortly after mid-century, and if we don't, we could stop that. I mean, we could take action to reduce carbon pollution and avoid that. We're actually headed towards a tripling or quadrupling of CO2 levels. So there's a great danger that we are headed similarly towards, warming of the order of 9 degrees Fahrenheit, which would be,
disastrous,
destructive.
Yeah, absolutely screaming disastrous.
Geologists are still conflicted on the time period of when this event may have happened, either between 200,000 years or was it only a few hundred years. If it happened within an average of 6,000 years, this could be the signature of a lost civilization, but most likely it never reached Type 1 or even our level of Type 0.8. Instead, they may have stagnated as a Type 0.5 for thousands of years, burning forests down for agriculture with some level of industrial capacity, but may have never discovered oil in mass like we did in the late 19th century. This hypothesis is called the Silurian hypothesis. Now, most scientists only see this as a thought experiment, but more professors like Dr. Joe Romm could see it as a viable hypothesis to consider, especially since archaeology and geology are only about 120 years where we actually start to sample less than 1% of the archaeological record. so we may not have even found the bones of the Silurian civilization. It could take another 200 years until we stumble upon their bones if they only were the size of humans, and if the population stayed under 1 billion. Although when it comes to large fossils like the size of Utahraptor, the real velociraptor, and animals larger than that, according to some studies, we have actually found like 50% or less of those fossils. So that's a large sample. Keep in mind, about 10% of a species does get fossilized. But when it comes to something the size of humans, things can get kind of blurry, so it could be only 10% or less. Although we have found many small fossils, but many small species tend to be the vast majority. Of those, it could only be 1% that we found. So any civilization older than 3000 BC is considered mythical, like Atlantis, but anything older than 10,000 BC becomes obscure, especially if that civilization is only type 0.5 and below. So 99% is actually not right unless you're lumping in the thousands of frog species and insects and fungal species and plants, which could greatly skew the statistical data. In actuality, we found a large sample of large animals, so if a type 0.5 or below civilization existed, it could just be a matter of time until we run across their bones, maybe the next 200 years. But it could take longer due to Romer's Gap's conundrum, where from 360 to 345 million years ago, there is a strange lack of fossils being found in certain layers. And this is not the only gap that archaeologists have noticed. It just so happens that the PETM there is also a gap, but some mainly attribute this as the period where life is still recovering from the KT extinction. Although others argue it simply could be because not enough archaeological research has been done in these specific layers and locations. Also, the temperate regions of the Earth at the time were actually in the northern and southern hemispheres, like Canada, Siberia, Australia, and Antarctica, where it has been heavily glaciated and scraped away. Just as we see population densities on the east coast of the US and China, so too the Silurian civilization could have been mainly concentrated in certain regions on the planet, where heavy erosion has been taking place. Now, this humanoid race would not even be a hominid.
Ottawa, Ontario, 1982. At the National Museum of Canada, paleontologist and curator of vertebrate fossils, Dale Russell, publishes a thought experiment. Based on the trend toward larger brain sizes and the upright posture of dinosaurs. He proposes a theory about what one species of dinosaur would have evolved into if it had survived the mass extinction 65 million years ago.
What he did is take the dinosaur known as Troodon. They noticed the morphological changes in the skeletal structure of the dinosaur, and based on over time where it was going, they extrapolated it out further. And strangely enough, or wonderfully enough, they actually came up with a model that resembled a humanoid reptilian being, which actually matched that of the reports that we were hearing now, as well as reports from ancient history. So for me, this was one of the most compelling pieces of information where science actually says it is possible.
The dinos hadn't died out. This would have become what he called the dinosauroid, an upright standing, semi-humanoid, semi-reptilian entity, what we might call a reptoid. He thought it might stand 4 to 5 feet high, weigh about 90 pounds, and have a fairly advanced brain. Now, did this entity ever come into existence?
What if some of the dinosaurs didn't become extinct? What if they managed to survive the global extinction or presumed extinction 65 million years ago? And over time, some of them developed through natural selection and they grew smaller, they became more intelligent, they became more adept and adaptive and took on a humanoid form. We necessarily shouldn't think that the reptilians are extraterrestrials. Perhaps in some strange way they're our forefathers, albeit from millions and millions of years in the past.
If the reptilians do exist, could they be the descendants of dinosaurs that walked the Earth millions of years ago?
Our concept of dinosaurs is changing all the time, of course, and nowadays we're making so many new discoveries every year that we're reinterpreting them in many ways. Certainly, if you look 20, 30 years back, there were so many things that have been found and so many other things we know now. Particularly, I think it's been very important that nowadays is completely very well accepted the idea that dinosaurs are not extinct. The dinosaurs essentially evolved into birds and that they're alive today.
Now again, don't fall for that reptilian alien bullshit. If people are seeing something like this, then more than likely it's a demonic manifestation, no different than the gray aliens and the Bigfoots and the Dogman sightings. But angels have existed since the Big Bang, so it's possible supernatural creatures have implanted knowledge from eons ago into people's minds today to affect us spiritually and psychologically. But the PETM is not showing evidence of a Type 1, but possibly a civilization at the level of the Middle Ages, but never have reached the technological level of us, hence why there's so much abundance amounts of oil that has never been tapped prior in the ancient past until today. And there may be some neurological differences on IQ with the Silurian civilization, along with environmental determinism factors that could inhibit the advancement of a technological civilization. It might take more than one intelligent species for evolution to finally give birth to a Type 1 civilization. Also, supernatural interventions can either inhibit or speed up the evolutionary process, with spontaneous creations of retroviruses that affect our DNA, which could have gave birth to our language abilities. Now, with the knowledge that we have on dinosaurs, I don't think the Silurian civilization would have actually looked like a reptilians, but instead something kind of like a hybrid between sort of a reptile and a bird, with a human physique. But most likely this species evolved from a raptor-type species, maybe like Troodon, around 3 or 4 feet. Something that size could possibly survive the KT extinction event. But it would have caused a bottleneck population, just like we went through a bottleneck population over 70,000 years ago through the Toba eruption. So after 10 million years after the KT extinction, they would have had enough time to evolve into a dinosauroid, with an average height of maybe 6 feet, with more bird-like adaptations, although instead of hair they would have had more fine feathers on their head. And they probably laid only a few eggs at a time, which would have made them more parental kind of species, like modern birds today. If God did allow angels to speed up the process of evolution, then they could have arisen very quickly, just as we did around 10,000 years ago with civilization. Also, don't get this idea that the Silurian civilization was living among dinosaurs. The only dinosaurs that may have been living among them are small raptors or avian dinosaurs that survived the KT extinction, but may have not have survived the extinction caused by the Silurian civilization through its global warming. At this time, there were not many large animals, so if the Silurians were not able to domesticate beasts of burden, it can greatly inhibit their technological progression and stagnate them. Keep in mind that was one of the main inhibitors for Native American cultures because of the lack of having horses. So it's not enough to just be a habitable planet to develop civilization. The evolution of the right creatures and environmental determinisms also have to be just right. And major natural disasters like an asteroid can either help or hurt the process, just as the Younger Dryas impact theory may have actually helped kickstart civilization. So the extinction of the dinosaurs eliminated the competition, giving small raptors like maybe Troodon to have a chance to evolve into a higher being without over competition with other predators. Who knows, maybe God had strategically planned the extinction of the dinosaurs. Nature may seem random in our perspective, but there can be many mysterious unseen forces that steer evolution to develop intelligent species. And this is what I mean by intelligent design, or intelligent programming. Now you might say, where's the evidence? Well, for right now, if we are trying to look for an ancient civilization in the past, we need to start with the signature of a global warming event, and narrow down which ones seem most likely to have the best conditions. Of all the global warming events, it's the PETM that has the sharpest, which does not fit the normal cycles of eccentricity of the planet. Then archaeologists need to start really looking at that layer in the most logical locations, like the edge of a glacial maximum where evidence may not have been completely pulverized. So basically we need to find out-of-place artifacts.
So I'm at the Creationist Museum. Now, don't take this the wrong way. I am a creationist, but I'm an old Earth creationist. So it's a little awkward being here. A lot of people, but there are some real artifacts here, but majority of it's just replicas, so it's just all kind of pomp and, show. But the only artifact we need to keep an eye on is the London one, because that is concretion, and the concretions can be very old. So, but I haven't found any other interesting artifacts here, except for a few Native American artifacts that are kind of interesting. But yeah, that's interesting. I just don't see why creationists have to believe the Earth is young, because time is really different to God. But they don't understand. They have a very simplistic idea of God. Okay, 1 billion years to us is like 1 day to God, probably. But it's an interesting little museum.
Next, Dr. Ball will show us irrefutable evidence that dinosaurs and humans lived together. These artifacts disintegrate evolution.
So this is the London artifact. The only way they're gonna know is if someone takes this out of here and steals it and tests it. But what's definitely real about it is the concretion. And the thing is, concretions can be extremely young or extremely old. And that's the dilemma. But the fact that it's not petrified makes me really doubt it. But basically, artifacts like this is what we need to find in a petrified form in order to really know if there was a lost civilization, tens of millions of years ago.
So the London hammer was found in London, Texas in 1934 on a loose outcropping near a stream. But it wasn't until the 1980s that creationists got a hold of it, so it never was properly examined. It was found on Cretaceous rock dating to around 110 million years, so it could not be any older than that. Most likely the concretion is a lot younger, no older than the extinction of the dinosaurs. So it's possible that the concretion could be 55 million years old, but the fact that the hammer was not petrified and the wood makes me think that it's just an 18th century miner's hammer that was left behind and got cemented by limestone. But we will never know for sure until the wood is dated with carbon-14 to see if it's older than 50,000 years old, let alone 50 million. So if there really was a Type 0.5 civilization 55 million years ago, there still might be petrified artifacts we have yet to find. And there are many amateur fossil hunters who may have stumbled upon obscure artifacts, such as by YouTuber Boxing Clever Round 2.
And another interesting item I have here is a metal that's already starting to petrify into stone. Now, I found this in the mud as well, and it looks like it was on a quayside or staked into the ground to hold possibly a boat or an animal staked to a field of some sort. But this inside bit is turning to stone. Very difficult to make it out on the camera. You need to really see it to understand what's happening here. So yeah, here he is. This is the where you put the chain on it, or whatever it was. It's obviously pretty old. It's crumbling away here. I don't know how long it's going to last. But the inside of it is already stone. I'm sometimes looking at this, I'm wondering if it was maybe even wood at one point. It's very heavy though. But on the top bit there is metal, and that may have been wood. But whatever it is, it's turning to stone on the inside and still getting there on the outside. Anyway, thanks for watching. I hope that was quite interesting.
We assumed that artifacts of a lost civilization would be different, but design follows function, so a miner's hammer from a lost civilization will look very similar to a modern hammer, to the point that we might not be able to distinguish the two without contextual evidence, which is lacking in the London hammer. So instead of focusing so much on the London hammer, there may be obscure petrified artifacts like this post that could go undetected by archaeologists, Now keep in mind, rapid petrification can happen, especially with small objects. So creationists like to use this as evidence of a young Earth, but they don't take into consideration of the stages of petrification and that it's relatively rare and limited to small objects. So it's possible that this post with the metal hook he found near a river could be Native American, maybe 3000 BC, or just a few hundred years, if the conditions were just right. So again, it's about context. Most petrified old wood is very old because of the size and the stratification that it fell off from. But the process of petrification can be rapid, but only for small objects in the right rare conditions, like very compacted wet silt with sand blocking oxygen and microbes from getting in. So there is a chance that this object could be millions of years old, but more than likely it's just a few hundred to 1,000, because it looks like it's at the beginning stages of petrification. Now, if the London hammer formed a geological concretion really quickly and vacuum sealed the wood and hammer under pressure without opal and silicon, it's hard to say if it would preserve to some degree without petrification. The hammer may have started to decay in the concretion until it used up all the oxygen, or until there was no more oxidation to take place, until it broke off, and possibly from an earthquake, that it was finally exposed again and started to erode. So it may have been exposed for a few hundred years before the discovery in the 1930s. We just don't know. Because if you leave a hammer in space, it's going to last for millions of years, assuming it's not drifting in and out of the sun. So it would be interesting to hear Robert Schoch and Randall Carlson about this artifact. So maybe share this video to them. But right now, it's exposed to the air for the past 86 years or more, so it's going to only have a few hundred years left. So someone better get in there and steal it and get that shit tested. It was noted by Max Hahn, the person who discovered it with a friend, that it did have a shiny quality to it until it was exposed to the air. So maybe this was a tool of the Silurian civilization. As I explained in my Venus video, I see no problem with God manifesting in different avatar bodies to appear to past or future civilizations. But if God appeared to the Silurians, then they must have reached type 1, then died out within 20,000 years, a blink of an eye in geological time. But if the Silurians were more primitive, then God may have waited until evolution took its course before appearing to us. I think with planets like ours, there may only be 3 chances of advanced civilization arising and dying. If there are more, we should be able to detect them and find their artifacts. We found hundreds of dinosaurs, small and big, but we have not found evidence of advanced civilization in the past. This could indicate that planets only have 1 or 2 advanced civilizations within its lifetime of about 600 million years. For keep in mind, the Earth only was habitable for about 500 million years. It takes millions of years for God's program, that is evolution, to create complex life. God is eternal, so he's willing to wait. And maybe we are the first on this planet, and within the next tens of millions of years away from now, your backyard squirrel might be next in line to receive a soul. And maybe it will be the last to evolve into advanced civilization, before the sun gets too hot. The signature of the PETM could point to advanced civilizations just being a blip in time, and only a few blips may emerge per planet. So I would tell creationists that believing in the old Earth makes us even more special in the eye of God. Our blips start with the birth of civilization that sparked other civilizations, and that mother civilization is Egypt, the land of the Garden of Eden and the land of Atlantis. This is how you should look at Genesis, so stay tuned for Egypt and Eden Part 5 Atlantis. And let me know what you all think, and leave a comment and a like. This has been Enigma Seeker. Keep seeking those enigmas.
Enigma depravatio est.